Um, Thank you all for being here tonight. I'm Angie. I'm a member of the Raleigh Ringers, and we have been hosting these weekly community group roundtables and just really enjoying the time that we are able to share and learn from one another. Last week we did recording and audio and live streaming, and we had so many questions and we kind of went a little deeper on that topic. So Brian and Kevin were nice enough to let us kind of bump their portion of last week into this week. So we're going to go over the virtual handbell ensembles and, for lack of a better term, the one-person choir. If we have a more official term, Brian or Kevin?
I haven't come up with anything better yet.
Okay. So these have kind of been born out of necessity, and I've certainly been entertained by these, and wanted to give people a chance to hear from them and how they're facilitating them and ask questions. So first, unless Dave, did you have anything to say?
No, the other thing is, if we have time after we cover these topics at the end, we'd be interested in hearing any other creative ways you guys are ringing during this time too. So, but we'll make sure we cover our two guest speakers thoroughly first.
So I'll do a quick introduction. Most of you probably know both of them, or at least have seen their videos on the various handbell channels. So Brian Seaman, wave Brian, is up there? Well, he's in my top right corner. I don't know where he is on your screen. He lives in McLean, Virginia, where he is the music director of Virginia Bronze and the handbell director at the National United Methodist Church in Washington, D.C. He also works as the assistant handbell instructor at the Potomac School in McLean, Virginia. He has been music director of the Philadelphia Handbell Ensemble and the New England Ringers, and has performed with Sonos Handbell Ensemble, Back Bay Ringers, and the Philadelphia Handbell Ensemble. You'll have to ask Kevin Quick, our next person, how you pronounce Potomac, and he can give you a fun story behind that, which is why I was laughing in the middle of that. So Kevin Quick, where are you, Kevin?
Yeah, I'm here.
He lives in Cary, North Carolina. He recently graduated from Duke University with his Master's of Divinity, and he is the newly hired director of music at Highland United Methodist Church here in Raleigh. He's also been producing videos of himself as a handbell choir, and with other church ensembles where he is. He is also an alumnus of the Raleigh Ringers. So I'll let you guys take it away and tell us everything you know. And if you have questions, everyone, you can either say them out loud, or if you'd like to, if you'd prefer, you can put them in the chat, and I'll monitor that and make sure we're getting everybody.
You care to go first or second, Brian?
No, doesn't matter. You can start.
Okay, I'll go ahead and start then. So, hi everyone, I'm Kevin. So I started doing these one-person, whenever I do it, one-person handbell choir videos, and I always put quotes over the choir, since it's just me up there. So up to this point, I think I've released like 4 handbell videos, and I've already done number 5 and 6, and I started working on number 7 today. So all this came out of the fact that, like maybe many of your churches, you're not able to meet. So people still, kind of expect music, preludes, postludes, and some other things like that. So I began doing my handbell videos as a result of that after finishing all my coursework. So that's kind of how I got into the sphere of wanting to do these one-person handbell video things myself. My method, how I've been doing this, is basically assuming I have almost no budget and using whatever I have lying around. So I go to a church. We have typically maybe 300 people, somewhere between 200 and 300 people every week, and a good amount of them also stream. And because of that, my church already had 2 microphones that would be suitable for this. If anyone cares, they're AKGs. You probably have seen them before. I'll type the exact kind in the chat right here. So I have two AKG mics, and they're different than your typical cardioid. Sorry, I don't have a bunch of mics at home like Andy did last week. But they're typically good at getting a whole lot of stuff. They're not meant to just be, like singer mics. They're meant to get a bunch. So I already had those two. I also, from a separate project, have what's called an audio interface. I think that's the technical name. The specific one I have is a Scarlett Focusrite 2i2. But this isn't super necessary. What I do with this, it allows me to connect the microphones to this interface, and then through this interface, through a USB adapter into my iPad. And I've drawn some lovely pictures. You would think I'm better with graphic design and stuff like that, but I'm not. So I've essentially drawn a picture. So if you all have seen my videos before, here's my table. Here I am. I'm a little stick figure because that's as good as my art gets. And then all the background, I drew our altar over here. And as you can see, I have a whole lot of messy stuff over here, which you all don't see. Thankfully, I've drawn it a whole lot better. So the system that I use is I have two separate microphones that are plugged into this audio interface. So from that audio interface, it connects via this USB to Lightning adapter. That allows you to connect USB devices into your Apple products, which most likely by this point only have that super small Lightning connector. And that adapter goes into the iPad. I also have a power bank that I use to plug into said adapter just for some extra power because, as you can imagine, this takes up a whole lot of power. So that's kind of my hardware that I use. And then, did I draw it in this picture? Yeah, I have my microphones maybe 6 feet away from the table, maybe 5 feet away from each other, both pointed toward me. So the app that I use on my iPad, it's called Acapella. Let me pull up it on my phone so you all can see. Yes, I have a lot of unread emails. So it's a little app. It's red. It has two microphones. So just click on that and it brings you to this app. You have to make an account. There is a free version and a paid version. The paid version, you can either pay monthly, and it's, I think, $10 a month, or you can pay yearly, which is a little less than $50. Depending on how we do in this quarantine, maybe I'll shell out the money for the year thing. But right now I'm paying week to week, and it does include a 1-week free trial of the paid version. So the difference between the paid version and the free version is with the paid version, you get rid of the little watermark that says acapella at the bottom. And you get a few more options also. And you get to save in a higher quality video than you would otherwise. But you're easily able to do the free version. So all you do on this app is you click at this bottom and you can create a new project. So I'll record a new project. And then you have choices of a million different kinds of screens depending on how many folks you want. So how I've been doing it is I've been recording all the bass spells, which is 6. So 6 different frames. So I'll record starting with B4, C5. It's a very arbitrary position to work with, but that way I have 6 bass on the right and 7 trebles on the left side. So I'll record all of the bass. So I'll start with the B and C, work my way down. We have a 5-octave set of handbells and chimes. So that's 13 positions, more or less. So with that, I do them all, and then I listen to it, and I'm like, ooh, I should probably redo, the first few, because setting that first track is super duper hard. just because you literally have nothing else to record with. And if you miscount just by one quarter note, you don't find out until the end of your take. I should also say that when I'm playing, I have headphones on, not only listening to other handbell parts, but also I make a click track. And I do that via Sibelius, but I know you can also do it in Finale. And I imagine there are many other free products that you're able to do. Ooh, Karna says free version, songs up to 1 minute. That's right. I think it's up to 3 minutes for the free version. And almost all the pieces I've done thus far have been more than 3 minutes. So the paid version is what I've done. Thanks, Karna. Yes, acapella does have a click track. The benefit of making your own click track, which I do in a music notation software, is I use tempo blocks. That way I'm able to click in kind of like an intro. So most recently, I've just been doing like a 1, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I play. That way it's super clear in my ear. There's no question about it. That gives me enough time to get in position and then do a nice, pretty hands-on bells up, which I know a whole lot of choirs love to do. And it looks better whenever we all lift together. So I make that click track. Oh, also the benefit of making your own click track is you're able to set different tempos. So if there's a retard in the piece or a meter change, you're able to do that with this click track that you've notated. You're also able to play along with other songs in a cappella. I haven't used that feature personally, but I know it's there. And I imagine you would also be able to just record yourself going 1, 2, 3, 4. If you trust your own tempo, in case you don't have the technology to kind of make your own click track. So you could always do that as well. Made click track, and then I make all the bass recordings from that. And then I export those bass recordings as a separate video. And then once you have a video in acapella, you're able to import one video into it. So after recording the right 6, then I'll record the others. And let me find, they have options where one is on, that one's on the left. I use the one where it's on the right. Can everyone see that? And so I'll upload the previous video into that black slot. And then the other 8 is when I'll put the treble, the 7 positions for the treble, and then there's one left over. With that, I guess I should pause at this point to see if there are any questions about this. I know it takes a while to type questions.
I'll also jump in and just about my click track. I do almost the exact same thing. I will make a click track in Finale, and the reason I like that is the same thing that Kevin said. If you end up with any tempo changes all the way throughout, you can actually create that in Finale. I also like to hear whatever it is I'm playing. So in any of the click tracks I make, I also have a piano sound at least playing the full choir version. So it's a lot better than just the metronome going. You can't get lost as easily if you can hear the rest of the music going in your head. So that's what I'll usually do. I'll make I use Finale, but recording of click track from that has a claves making the metronome sound, and then the piano sound being the full choir part.
I should also say that for one of the pieces, I think it was Velocity, I went ahead and put in the entire piece on Sibelius. That way I could play along with it, but that's because I was expecting Velocity to be extremely difficult as opposed to just ordinary difficult, like the other pieces thus far. So thanks, Brian. So question, do you use any editing to the audio like noise reduction? If so, what software? And Andy asks, how high are the microphones from the floor? I'll answer Andy's first because it's super quick answer. As tall as my mic stands go, which is about 5 feet off the ground. If I had better mic stands, they would probably be a little higher, pointed down. That's just not the mic stands that I have. So in terms of editing to the audio, such as noise reduction, thus far I have not done any noise reduction, but I did contact Andy Punch yesterday to see about that, because the most recent piece I did is actually a double choir piece. So it's a handbell choir and a hand chime choir. I'll see if I can pull that up. But with that, the AC ran a whole lot. So the most recent thing I did had this many positions. And I hope to be able to premiere it on Facebook in like 2 weeks. So in terms of noise reduction, no, I haven't had to do that yet. I would like to. And I'm sure as soon as I kind of learn that kind of software, I'll begin doing that. But I generally learn things as I have to. I should also say in acapella, it does have the option to do some panning. So being able to take a position and say, okay, I want this position mostly in the left ear or mostly in the right ear. So I began doing that with the software, and it worked super duper well. But then there was a glitch in the software where if I tried to pan it a little, it only panned to the right side or left side. So what I'm trying now is reducing the gain in the microphones so that whenever I'm playing the high B6, C7, I'm reducing the gain on the right ear. So it's mostly the left microphone that picks it up. I should also say that with this technology, I'm only using the interface and microphones because I happen to have them. I think for the purposes of recording for church, maybe some of you are recording for church, it doesn't have to be super high audio. If your church is used to super high audio, most likely your church already has these good audio devices, such as microphones. But if your church is just used to your pastor with Facebook Live or something like that, you probably don't need that. I set up my iPad on a music stand. I know this is an iPhone, by the way, but I set up my iPad on a music stand pointed toward me. I look through it. It's a whole lot easier that way. I should also say with the click track, I don't know if Brian does this or not, I leave a few measures of silence beforehand, which gives me enough time to press the button, run over to the table, make sure my stole is on all right, I'm looking fine, pages are turned, and then I'll start hearing the clicks. So I do leave a little bit of silence, or else you'll most likely be running in at the last moment or have to use someone else. I should also say that I'm lucky enough, lucky enough, don't get me wrong, to have a wife who's willing to help record. She's mostly working at home all day, so she really enjoys getting out of the house. So she doesn't mind going up and pressing the buttons for me. That way I don't have to get out of position. And it saves a little bit of time to have someone helping. If I were her, I would be bored out of my mind, but she hasn't appeared bored yet. She's been reading and things like that. Okay, let's start looking at some questions. Any options for Windows software? Yes. So I think Brian will, Brian, are you talking about Adobe Premiere?
Yes, and then I also list a couple of, because I pay for Adobe and it is fairly expensive, but there are a couple free options that are similar to the Adobe products that I can talk about as well.
So I'll leave those Windows options to him. I'm sorry, I forgot to say that. Unfortunately, Acapella is only compatible with iPhone and iPad, which is really unfortunate for all of you Android users or people, yeah, pretty much Android, non-Apple products. So I'm sorry about that. But Brian will talk about what Windows users can do later. So yes. Oh, Brian already said that. I'm sorry. How do you hold copyrights for music that is pre-recorded for inclusion in a worship service that is shared on Facebook and or YouTube? So that is a great question. So most likely your copyrights can be covered under what's called one license. I'm not sure if it's covered under CCLI. So like I think it was Derek who talked about last week about copyright stuff. Generally for what, I'll repeat what Derek has said, and if handbell publishers get mad at Derek, not at me. I'm just repeating what he said. So generally, handbell publishers like it whenever you show off their music, because I imagine whenever any of us discover a handbell song, it's because we've heard another group do it, or we listen to a recording in a catalog. But I imagine many times we discover new songs, new pieces based on what other choirs are doing. Maybe we hear it at a festival or something like that. So they generally like that free marketing that they get. So they typically don't mind copyright for music, with the exception of if, like Jeffers or Agape, any of the handbell publishers, if they don't actually own the copyright, if it's like a pop song, such as You Raise Me Up, which is owned by Universal Music, then it gets a little bit more complicated in terms of then you have to really worry about copyright and things like that. So generally, YouTube, I should also say, instead of doing the more difficult legal thing, YouTube kind of has a workaround which publishers are generally happy with, which is if you upload a song, let's say my buddies and I in my garage, we record the song You Raise Me Up by Josh Groban, Celtic Woman, whatever version you prefer. So if we do that and we upload it to YouTube, and if we actually become famous from this and get a whole lot of views, normally that money would go toward us. But instead, that money can go toward the actual copyright owner. And there's all sorts of technical YouTube jargon that I'm not going to bore the rest of you with.
I will say that what we were taught in design school is if it's not yours, you cannot use it for free without permission. That was like the boilerplate of copyright law. So our official stance is please check with the copyright holders before you use their materials.
Yes.
I have no way of enforcing that, but I would encourage that.
Right. And for this quarantine, I know a lot of publishers have just given blanket permission to use their stuff in worship. There are different laws between doing something live in worship and then streaming it and pre-recording it. There are different laws with that. I happen to be at a church that has one license, which pretty much covers all of this stuff. So that's an annual fee.
And now that more people are doing things like this, either both digital PDF music and then this kind of recording stuff, a lot of the handbell publishers starting to have form responses to these questions. So when in doubt, write to whoever the publisher is and just say, here's what I'm planning to do with this. Let me know. And almost always they will have a form response that says, yep, just do this, list us as in the credits, and you're good to go.
Yeah. And that's really important too. In all the videos that I've posted, I've always posted the copyright info about who actually owns that music. So Andy has asked, gain reduction to pan live recording or after the live recording video. I've done it the live recording, but I know it's possible after the live. I don't think it's possible for my software to do it post live recording. So that. Dale Myers asks, how long did it take to record and finalize one entire piece? Depends on the piece. So my very first piece that I did was Kevin McChesney's Capriccio. I estimate that took me around 7.5 hours. But a few hours of that was me learning how things work. So there is a learning curve to it. The first time for about 2 hours, I recorded the bass parts, and then another 2 hours re-recording the bass parts so it sounded more together and better. And then 3.5 hours for the 7 treble parts for that piece. The next one, Gaudiamus by Arnold Sherman, only took me 5.5 hours just because I already knew it and there was less technical stuff. After that, I've tried to get fancier. Kevin McChesney's Ascension that I did involved the pianist, and that took a while because it took the pianist a while to record her part, because you basically have to take it all in one take. There's no stopping and splicing with my method. So after recording her, then I had to go back and re-record my bass, and then I did treble.
So we have a question in the chat from Damien. about the softwares that Brian uses. So maybe this is a good segue.
Mhm.
Brian, why don't you kind of give us an overview of the processes that you use, what's similar, what's different, and then you can talk more about Premiere Pro. Damien says he's by and large using online iMovie. So we'll kind of get your perspective, and then we'll go back and take some more questions and keep going with discussion.
Sure. So my process, I've been sort of doing these videos, these type of videos on and off for a long time. If you look back into the whole of YouTube, there's a video of me from 9 years ago doing Lady Gaga's Born This Way as a quartet that I sort of arranged myself. The quality of it is terrible. But so I started this process before acapella was a thing. So I kind of do it a little bit more traditionally. I did, when I originally started, like the Lady Gaga video was done with just a USB Yeti mic. That's really as high quality as you need for this project for like church services or for fun. I have gotten better equipment because I also record Virginia Brown's concerts or things like that. So I wanted to have that equipment for other things. So what I will do, ClickTrack is pretty much all the exact same as what Kevin and I discussed earlier. My process for recording is I will go through and record all of the audio first, usually. And most of the time I do them separately. I will record the audio first and then go back and record the video. And part of that is because it's less stress when you go back and record the video later, because the sound already exists. So you can make as many mistakes as you want. And as long as it looks like you're playing what you're hearing, you're good. And then you could also, that way I could record without headphones and not be tied to different things. So if you look at the Toccata Ritmica video that I posted at the start of the quarantine period, that's done. I recorded all of the audio first and then edited that together and then went back and recorded the video. So that's why I'm not wearing headphones in that video. When I did the CTVRS Fe video, I did do both of those at once. I still recorded the audio, went into Adobe Audition, which is what I use for audio, and then the video went separate, and then I edited them both separately and then put them together. But I did them at the same time. So what you see me ringing in that video is what you also hear me ringing. And I like to do the audio separately because I can do a whole lot more editing for things like noise reduction somebody asked about before. Especially in the apartment that I'm in right now, I'm right next to the air intake vent. And so even turning off all of the air conditioning and turning off all the rest of the stuff, there's still a lot of noise in this specific apartment. And so I want to make sure that I could cut that out. Or if one of the cats runs off and knocks something over in the background, being able to edit that out later. I can also adjust and sort of fix some of the mistakes I make sometimes. If I play something early by accident, I can go back in and edit that and move it a little bit later. And I definitely do that sometimes. Or there's also, as I was going through and editing the CTVRS Fe video, I realized at one point I played a B flat when we were it should have been a B natural. And so I was able to delete that out. So it's a little bit more leeway that way. And then also at that point, I have a completed audio file. It sounds like what I want it to sound like. So I do everything through, I just saw Andy's question. I do all of the audio through Adobe Audition. Adobe is a subscription service and I pay the monthly fee for all of the Adobe products. So I use Audition for that. For recording, for the noise reduction, for all the editing, for lining everything up and piecing it all back together. I have also used, before I started to have Adobe, when I was originally doing this, I used Audacity, which is a similar program, has many of the features that you would need for this. Like it has all of the features that you would need for a project like this. Doesn't have the super high-end stuff, but it's free. You can still do the noise reduction in there. You can still line things up. You can still balance different sections, all with Audacity. After that is complete, I'll then go through and record the video, or if I had recorded the video at the same time, go through and edit the video in Adobe Premiere, which is, again, the Adobe's video editing software. We'll go through and line all the videos up. And so I'll drop them all into the timeline in Premiere, line them all up. And to do that, what I've started doing now is as part of the click off before a piece starts, I'll put a clap in. And so I'll like 4 beats before the downbeat, I will clap. And so that helps line up the audio tracks later, because you can audibly hear the clap, but you could also see that happening. It's the same reason why when you watch movie filming, why they have that clipboard or click thing. It's so that they can all line that up later. So I've used that clap to help. And at that point, after I've lined that up, I'll go through and rearrange in the grid format. So the nice thing about acapella, like Kevin uses, is that you can set, it has the layout as a preset, where in Adobe Premiere, you have to manually resize and move each of the clips. But it's just a matter of scaling and positioning. So you can, like to make a quad grid, you just scale each of those clips down to 50%, and then you can drag them up to each of the corners. And then I'll drop in the already recorded and edited audio portion and mute the audio from each of the video tracks. So you're not hearing the audio that was recorded from the video, you're hearing the audio that I had edited separately. At this point, I'm also going to pause for questions. Oh, because Audacity is a great free version, or not a free version, but a free substitute for Audition. For Premiere, if you do not have that, I think almost all, I'm not a Mac person, but I think almost all of the newer Mac computers have iMovie. And if not, DaVinci Resolve is a great freeware video editing that should have all of the abilities that you would need to do, but in a free program. That's DaVinci Resolve. About doing a recording with several ringers. So I think what you mean is like doing what we are doing, or what Kevin and I did, but actually using more than just ourselves. Is that, I'm assuming that's what Maggie just posted in the chat. That's what I'm actually doing with my church. So I went and rescued all of the bells for my church and distributing them out to the ringers. And so it's the same process. I went through and made the click track in Finale. I put in the first piece that we did that I'm editing right now is Kathy Mokovest's Calming Piece. And I went in, made the click track, also put in a piano part for the bell part so they can hear the whole thing. And for them, since this is for a church service, I'm not as concerned about the quality, and obviously they don't all have any fancy microphones or anything else like that. So what I'm having them do is if they do have a microphone or USB mic or anything else like that, they can use that and send it to me. But for this purpose, I'm just having most of them recorded on their phones. As we sort of discussed last week, the video quality on most cell phones, video and photo quality on most cell phones now is great. But the audio microphone is set up for the human voice, which is not the frequencies at all of handbells. So it's not ideal for audio, But for the purposes of putting together a piece for a Sunday service stream, it suffices, since not everybody has access to the equipment. If you wanted to get something higher and had at least one set of the nice recording equipment, is set up a time slot sign up at your church and sort of have everything set up, and then they can kind of come in and record and all use the same equipment. But I will get that, and I will take all of those videos as they come back, and I will do the same process. Even if they recorded them all together, I will still separate out the video and the audio. So for like the Nobel Ensemble that I did with all of those clips, I stripped out the audio out of all of the video submissions that everybody gave me, edited that all together, and made the complete audio version of the Nobel Ensemble, and then went back and edited the audio, or the video. So that way I could cut out all of the excess noise and anything else and do some editing, and definitely had to move some notes around in there as well and do some pitch corrects sometimes. But it's a lot easier I find it's a lot easier to do the audio separate from the video, because you can have a lot more control over the editing.
I'll also add for those of you who are looking at acapella, I've done this exact thing, not for handbell choirs. We recorded our children's choir singing "We Are the Church That I Am the Church, You Are the Church," which went over so well. Recorded the piano, and then had all the kids, the parents sign up. Oops. I just dropped a glass of water. I'm sorry. How unprofessional of me. So I had them all come in and sing. They signed up for a time slot. It took all of them less than 30 minutes to sing, like a 2-minute song. And then I left 30 minutes in between, because that's the guidance I've gotten from my church. 30 minutes in between the sessions lets kind of a lot of the particles that would host the coronavirus, allow them to settle. And then I wipe down all the headphones, stand, all that. So it's important to remember why we're having to do it like this too. And then for our church orchestra, we did a jazzy arrangement of Lord, I Want to Be a Christian. So we recorded the piano, drums, and bass first, and then started adding all these other instruments. And people just signed up for time slots. It's very easy to do. I got really good at giving people the whole spiel of, hey, you'll hear, all these clicks at the beginning. That's your intro. Make sure you go all the way at the end. Whenever you're done, you'll hear 2 clicks, and then you're off, and then you can go into rest position. So basically anything you can do by yourself, most likely you can do with other people. For easeability and the fact that not everyone has iPhones or iPads, we just set up like a recording station in the sanctuary of the church. But I know that you're also able to collaborate with other acapella users. So if Brian was using acapella and he and I wanted to do a duet using acapella, I would record my stuff, and then I would allow him to collaborate, and then it loads all of the stuff into his device, and then he would be able to record and send it right back to me. My home church is doing this with their voice choir. That's how they're singing hymns every week, is the entire choir records and then sends to the next person, and at the end they have like 30 voices and an organ doing a piece. So
I just popped into the chat a link. I'm a visual learner, so I like to watch somebody actually do something. So when I actually did all of the video editing for the CTVRS Fave video, I did it live on a live stream, and I just popped it up. Unfortunately, I also did live stream the audio editing portion, but I didn't save it, so that's gone forever. But the video portion is up, and I just dropped that link in the chat. That's using Adobe Premiere and Adobe Audition to put everything together.
So we've talked a lot about click tracks, but what is an option for somebody who doesn't have music editing or music writing software? I don't have any of these softwares that you talked about. I know what they are, right, but what are some options for I just want to do this, but I don't have those softwares available to me.
If it's something that's a straight tempo and you just need a metronome to go, you can literally go to Google and type in metronome, and there's one that pops up. And so you can set that, and just my suggestion, if there is no other sound portion of that, to do that clap however many counts before you start playing. I don't know if a cappella you can do this when I'm recording and into Audition, or if you were recording into Audacity. You have an option to either listen to tracks you've recorded prior or not. Usually what I do is I only listen to the click track each time, so that way if I've made a mistake in the first one I recorded to, and then I base all the other recordings off of that, they're all going to have that same timing mistake. But if you only have a metronome and sort of want more of a reference, you can leave those on and listen to the tracks that you've already recorded. And that's why Kevin says, I think that's why you end up doing the bass first, so that you have more of a reference.
Yeah. So there is that option on acapella to essentially mute the others, or even just to make them softer. All the different tracks that you've already recorded. I take the opposite approach of Brian. I leave all of them on with the click track. That way I know if the first chord, is very splattered, even though I'm listening to the same, we're all listening to the same metronome, we all, as in all of the Kevin Quicks recording, when we exactly play may be a little different. So I've chosen to leave that. That way I'm able to listen and be like, oh, that chord really was not together. So there's that option too. I highly respect Brian's method. And if I were as good of a handbell musician as him, I would probably do his method too.
There are many takes in mine as well at times.
We had a good idea from Don Wood in the chat. He said instead of a hand clap, he rung a bell, as he didn't have a table to put the bell on. So that works. It's just something that you're getting a visual and a sound cue at the same time. Mm-hmm. And then Tony said, I listen to a metronome and make a video of myself counting for them. This also allows me to count measures: 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, etc.
Yeah, and that's great. I find it really hard to record to nothing but a metronome. So if you can do something like that and at least give yourself measure numbers over top of that. And then I was literally about to say what Carter just typed. If you are able to play the piano, or have somebody who can make you a piano recording to play through that and then follow along with that, that's a great idea. Yeah, I have also even done to moderate success once, and I haven't posted this video yet because of the moderate success, but found a recording of it online and played along with the recording online. You have to really know that, especially if there are tempo shifts in it, and that's why I was using that version, because I really liked the tempo that it was at. But you have to listen to it so many times that you know what to anticipate, because you don't obviously have a conductor in front of you to watch for those tempo shifts. But I have done that with playing along with a recording online.
I should also compliment both of those ideas. If I didn't have the software that I already had, I would probably do Tony's method. That way I'd be able to count, and it would especially be good for any kind of retard or accelerando. That way you're able to give yourself as much as you know as that you need in order to make your recording successful. I'm not a very good piano player, so I'd be afraid of playing, doing what's called, it's in the industry as a scratch track, of me playing piano, because I would be so afraid of just screwing up the tempo so much.
Carter also put another good point in the chat that if you're recording along with any sort of track, use wired headphones. Yeah. Bluetooth headphones, wireless headphones have a delay built in, and so you'll never be able to line everything up if you're using wireless headphones.
Yeah. So Damien asked, you all can see it, basically asking about kind of lag with the sync. I have only experienced that lag once, actually, and it was for my first recording, Capriccio. Whenever I added in the bass was off from the metronome just by a very small fraction. It was just a little early. So I made a separate click track that basically just let me come in, and I just anticipated a little, and then I got rid of the click track, which, if you know the piece Capriccio, as long as you have the bass for most of it, you don't really need a metronome. The bass functions as a metronome, but I would turn on the click track again in my program, in my music editing thing for the parts where the bass wouldn't help me. But I have not faced any sync issues since then. I expected a whole lot more sync issues, but I've been recording everything on my own phone.
And that's part of why I also, again, why I do the audio and video separately, because like Damien said, the sound was all perfectly in sync, but the video was not. And so you can make adjustments to the video. You can add or take away frames to kind of resync it if it gets off, without adjusting the audio if you do those two separately. And I will say, for those who have never done this process before, go in and just try it, because I was fairly comfortable with Audition before I started this process, before I started doing a lot of these virtual ensembles. So I knew my way around Audition. I knew my way around the audio editing to at least get what I wanted. I had not used Premiere or video editing anywhere near close to how I'm using it now, and I've taught myself a lot of it. And so the Toccata Ritmica video that I did was, I think, the first one that I really did in Premiere, and I just kind of learned as I went. And then when I did the first of the Nobel ensembles, the Capriccio one, again, I kind of learned as I went, and there's enough for any of those programs, for Premiere, for DaVinci Resolve, for iMovie, for any of that. There's enough forums and help online that you can pretty much Google, how do I do this Premiere, and find an answer. And so I am far from a video or audio expert. I know, and there's things that I learned throughout this process, and even things that I've learned literally from talking to other people about, here's what I do. I think halfway through the stream one day, somebody said, you can just do this. And I was like, oh, no, I didn't. So don't be intimidated by this, because I know I started from not knowing anything about video or audio editing, and I've sort of taught myself, and I'm still very, very far from Andy on audio editing, even though I feel comfortable enough to work in that.
Yeah, I'll echo everything Brian said. As soon as you enter into this process, just expect to make a lot of mistakes, because I've wasted so much time in my own recording sessions just with silly little mistakes, like forgetting to plug in the microphones, or mostly not plugging things in like I should, or forgetting to turn pages. So I get up there and it's completely wrong, things like that. So give yourself plenty of time to learn this stuff. It does take a slight investment of your time, no doubt. But just go in.
That's a good segue. What are some of the things you wish you had known when you started? Like, what are some of the easy pitfalls? Or things you've had the most frustration with that you wish you had known?
I'll let Brian think. I'll just answer with what comes to mind. Mostly the pieces that I chose to do. If I had to do this whole process over again, I'd probably start with an easier piece than Kevin McChesney's Capriccio. I'd probably start with, like a level 2, maybe 3-octave piece, with the focus of kind of learning how this works. Yeah, so don't reach high like I did on the first thing, because I wasted so much time learning how to do it.
I will echo the exact same thing. The first video I did of this kind of quarantine period was the Toccata Ritmica video, and it was because I had arranged it for quartet before, and I was like, oh, now's a great time to do that, without thinking about really how involved it was. So especially with that, having to learn the quartet pieces, like actually learn the parts, in addition to learning how to do the editing and all of that, it would have been much easier to play something that I was comfortable with and didn't require so many takes and so much recording time. And then same thing with the C.T. Veras Faye video. It's a syncopated Latin American folk song. Syncopation is not great to do for virtual ensembles. I would pick, if I would do it again, pick something very straight 4/4 time, as that's a whole lot easier to line up with all of the parts.
Yeah, definitely echo what he said. So Velocity, which I released yesterday, some of those positions have a lot of syncopation, like whoever your F and G5 ringer is, it's all off beats. It is so difficult. And that one by far has taken me the most amount of time out of all of the videos, out of all the positions, was F5, G5 for Velocity. So some songs are, I know Mitchell Ethan, who's on here, has mentioned running eighth notes. He's had, that makes it a little easier for him. For me, just kind of chordal, where everything is, all the notes are vertical. That's been super duper easy to record. It helps if you go into the process knowing well that piece. I knew Kevin McChesney's Capriccio pretty darn well. I can still sing it, and I still have my own position F and G5 part memorized. I can still play it in my sleep. So that certainly helped me a whole lot. Whenever I've tried to record pieces that I've never played before, and I'm just like, oh, sure, I've always wanted to do this. I've encountered more difficulty because I simply just don't know the piece as well. Andy just answered that audio question that I forgot to answer. If you use headphones, most likely you'll need some sort of headphone extender. The one I'm using is, I haven't measured it, but it's maybe 10 feet long. That way I'm able to set up the iPad, run over, and being able to already have my headphones there under the table looking pretty. So Mitchell has explained the running passages, LV eighth notes. I've totally noticed that. And something really nice for big block chords, if it's a huge C major chord, but for some reason you forgot to play C5 middle C, guess what? No one's gonna notice. If you're missing a note in the middle, as long as you have the highest note and the lowest note, and you don't add any different notes, that's good. So
yeah, and it's recording each part separately. So recording position 1, then position 2, then position 3 is actually easier to go back and correct mistakes than recording a full ensemble all at once, because you can, like I found the B flat instead of a B natural in the one part, so I can go literally to that position and just delete just that B flat 5, and the rest of that chord is still there and it sounds fine. So it's easier to just literally silence one wrong note when you record the positions separately like this. And I've also moved things. You can, on parts, if you're a little bit early on like a mart or something that's really obvious, you can take a few hundredths of a second from this side of it and put that on the other side of it and move that over without adjusting the length of the final thing. So you can kind of move around mistakes like that. And I've totally had to do that in some of my recordings.
So Andy has asked, have you ever added a missing note in post-production, meaning after you've recorded? And the answer is kind of. There have been a few times where I've missed a note in one position, but then I'm like, the next position can do that. So I'll just play that omitted note in the next position or something along those lines.
I've done the exact same thing.
Yeah. I didn't do it because I omitted the notes. The most recent piece I did was Cantique de Jean Racine, originally by Fauré, arranged by Arnold Sherman. That's the one that I showed you that has the handbell and hand chime part. And I listened to it again, and I'm like, man, the melody just doesn't come out in this one section. So I redo the very top position, B6, C7, which is an extremely easy part for that piece. And I just kind of solo rang the melody just to bolster it a little bit. So I have added notes in other positions to bolster things and just to fill in missing holes.
So Karna had an interesting note in the chat. I don't use any additional audio or video editing software besides the Acapella app. So my strategy is to figure out how many tracks I will need, add one more track, and if I forget a note, I can add it in that last track, or aim my camera at a flower or something pretty if I don't need it.
I love that.
That's a good low-tech strategy.
Yeah, and if you all have a 5-octave choir or even a 3-octave choir, which is 13 or 11 people respectively, those odd numbers don't exactly line up super nicely. So most likely you have an extra frame. I have an extra frame, which I just, as you all might have seen, I just post the title of the piece, who composed it, and my own name. And for that, unfortunately, Acapella only lets you import one video, so I'm not able to just add in a video of just the title. So I'm literally just standing here for 5 minutes with my iPad pointed toward the computer screen, trying to hold as still as possible recording. If I were better at planning or had more music stands around, I'd have a much better solution. But after recording for, like 3.5 hours, and it's 10 o'clock at night, I'm just like, no, I'll just do it like this.
Any other questions?
Yeah, if you're using it to answer Dale's question, if you're using another like an actual production software, editing software, you can take a picture and dump that in. But yeah, for acapella, you can only import one thing, and so Kevin said he imports the bass half of the recording.
So how many people are going to try this now? Anyone? I see a lot of like
too many of you
trepidatious hands there.
I will. Go,
yes,
Kevin.
Susan. I think after we all try it, we're going to have a million more questions.
Yeah. I'll type in my email. Feel free to email me with any question regarding my method. If you ask me about Brian's method, I'll just give a terrible answer.
Yeah, I was literally just going to say I'm happy to answer any questions, so I dropped my email in there as well.
Hopefully we didn't scare you. I'll say that when I started this, I had never done this before. I have played with a click track before, which is a different experience if you've never done that with a massive metronome in your ear. It is a completely different experience. But it took me a few days in order to get Kevin McChesney's Capriccio, and at the time, I hadn't been hired full-time at Highland yet, and I had just graduated, so I had all the time in the world to learn how to do this. So it's certainly possible to do, not knowing much at all. And if you don't know anything, you'll learn a whole lot just by doing this. So,
and if you are doing this with
all of your ringers' parts a whole lot better, and they'll respect you for it. So, which is nice when you're a 27-year-old kid in their eyes.
If you are doing this with your ensemble and like basically doing a virtual version of your church bell choir with all of those members, tell them the same thing, because they're going to be intimidated by going through this process, and same thing like Kevin just said of playing my part, but my part only without my friends around me into a click track. That's scary. From my ringers who have said that they were kind of nervous about it at first, and then after they did it, they're like, oh, actually this is not bad at all now, and they've gotten comfortable with it to the point where it's just what they do now. So kind of push them for the same kind of thing of just try it. It's not going to be completely comfortable at first, but you'll get a hang of it.
Yeah, I was actually just thinking this is a really good way to make sure you're playing your part correctly and not relying on the people around you.
Exactly.
To just kind of maybe be a little more loosey-goosey with things. you know, when you are not hearing the parts around you, you really have to be confident on what you're doing, and you can't rely on some of those audio cues. You have to be, you know, watching the director, i.e. the click track, and you have to play with that click track correctly. So maybe it's a good exercise for all of us to grow, even if we're not producing these videos. We've had a lot of great questions. Has anybody else tried something similar or done something with their group, maybe not to produce, but another way that you're rehearsing together?
So I was, not to answer your question you just asked, but I was going to, what I'm looking to do is to do a solo for church where I have just an accompaniment CD that I was going to play my bells with. And listening to you guys, I'm just completely overwhelmed, and I still don't like, I mean, that seems like what I'm talking about seems really simple, right? So how would you approach just, I have a CD or an MP3 track accompaniment that all I want to do is put bells with? How would you attack that?
I just did that for, or similar to, for one of our church services at National United Methodist is, I did the solo version of Karen Buckwalter's Nocturne in A minor, and the music director recorded the piano part, sent that to me, and then I played along with that. And what I did, I can even show you exactly what what my setup was for that. I had my bells all set up, and then the big screen above that is the music director with on the piano. So I could sort of keep an eye on her, like you would if you actually had an actual accompanist as you were playing a solo. Ran her through the headphones just the same way, and then I did that one. I did the audio and the video together. I set the microphone up, press record on the microphone. I actually used my cell phone for the video for that, and just set that along and press go. And then in Premiere, dumped the cell phone video in. I didn't edit much of that at all. I just dumped pretty much the solo as it was that I had recorded in Audition, just dumped that audio pretty much straight into Premiere and just synced them up. And then sent that back to the music director.
And if I don't have Premiere, you could also do that in Resolve.
Yeah, you can do that in Resolve. You can do that in
version.
iMovie. You can do, yep.
Okay. I'm going to give it a try.
Yeah. Organ with 4 ringers, recorded the organ part first and then emailed it out. So that's, yeah, started with a clap. That's what, the clap really helps to line things up. The clap is only as accurate as your clap is. So if you're lining up the track with only the clap itself, I would then go back and try to find, I look for like things like marts or something like that, that is a very clear staccato type sound to further line up the tracks. Because I noticed when I did the C2VRS Fe, I had 12 claps and they were all right about the beat, but they were not all exactly lined up. So I had to do some further tweaking. So the clap gets you really close, but the clap is not the only thing you should use to line everything up. You should still double check somewhere else in the music. I keep demonstrating, but I didn't say, I do the clap like this vertically, so that you can physically see your hands hitting. The tough part about lining up the video of bell parts is you can't see, if you're videoing from the front, you can't see when that clapper strikes the casting. So when I go and line up the video parts of all of the bells, I'll actually look for like a mart or a mallet or something like that if there is one in the track, because then you can actually see the clapper striking the casting, or the mallet striking the bell, and use that as much better cue. But that's why I will do a clap vertically like this as well.
Other questions or things you're wanting to accomplish and maybe have a question on how to do that? Give it a second to make sure. I'm not seeing any more in the chat. I think that's about all we have, unless Kevin or Brian, you have last words of wisdom.
My last words of wisdom is, I guess just give it a shot. How we've described it, just because of how you have to describe it, it sounds more intimidating than it actually is. And whenever you get there, it initially is intimidating. Your first time recording, it is super intimidating. That's something almost all of the church orchestra that I recorded, all of them said. But once they've, did one or two with the expectation of, this is a rehearsal track, we will not take this, we are not expecting you to play this perfectly, then eventually they see that it's not as bad as they think. I'll also say that I had the mics and the audio interface and all this complicated setup just because I had access to it. They were just 2 rooms over. If you're just recording for, church or something like that, most likely your iPhone or iPad or whatever phone microphone you use is probably good enough for that. If your church expects a higher quality of audio stuff, they'll already have that equipment. So if they don't, then the congregation just is not used to that high quality stuff. If I were producing a CD or wanted to make it big on YouTube, then maybe I would use fancier equipment, but I just don't have that at my disposal. So I just spend $10 a month. That's how much my method costs.
Maybe Andy should start a rental service.
Certainly.
We can work out something, Kevin.
Dale had a level up challenge in the chat. He said, set up all your tables and bells as normal with a background or blue green screen and show yourself as a full choir playing all the positions. So
yeah, that's something that Mitchell Ethan, who's on this chat, I know he has a green screen that he's used. My house is cluttered, so I don't necessarily have the room for that. And so my church is recording all of our services in our contemporary worship space. So a lot of the traditional folks are really missing seeing the sanctuary. And so that's why the sanctuary, you always see an altar and a cross behind me. And that's just because that's what our congregants kind of miss seeing. But the background is something to think about too. I know someone else has recorded outside. I thought that was really cool. I don't know if Brian could probably speak to this. So I recently saw a video where someone played a difficult piece. And I could only tell because I've recorded before. I think they originally played it much slower and then they sped it up in post-production.
Yep.
Maybe Brian or someone else can speak to that. But I know that's an option for people much fancier than me.
Yes, that is totally an option. And I have definitely used that before. And both, you can do that with both the audio and the video portion. You can speed them up and adjust them later. And I've never used the free video programs. I'm sure they've got that feature in there. I have used Audacity to speed up and slow down. You can definitely, there's a way that you can go in and adjust the tempo without changing the pitch. And Audacity actually has a really nice thing. If you know what tempo you were at and what tempo you'd like to be at, it automatically calculates whatever that percentage is and adjusts that. So there's ways that, yeah, if you're really struggling with something, you could slow it down, but then speed it back up again later. Or you could just post it as it is. I did a trio of harmonic convergence, and forgot how to use a metronome correctly, and I set it to quarter note equals instead of dotted quarter note equals, and we just posted it at the really slow tempo.
Well, in the chat, Mitchell gave away his secret. His green screen is a plastic tablecloth. So we're very high tech here. And then Stephanie Alm has asked, do you recommend a certain headphone extender?
There was one lying around at the church that I used. I'm sorry. In our contemporary praise band, they all have headphone extenders that they use in order to connect to their own personal monitor, to their own in-ear microphones. So I'm just borrowing one of those. I've never made that purchase before. Maybe Brian or someone else like Andy would be able to recommend something.
Yeah, Andy can probably, because I have headphones that are actually like studio monitor headphones that have the stretchy cord, so that's long enough to work for me.
I have actually been looking into this recently, and something that is rugged and has good shielding is the way to go. The thing is, you can't go to Radio Shack, well, at least there aren't many Radio Shacks around anymore. And what we've been using on Raleigh Ringer recording sessions, those were Radio Shack extensions for headphones. The large ones, the 1/4-inch plug, not the little bitty 1/8. I realize they're really spec'd in millimeters. And those have held up. Professional extension cords would have better shielding and probably be made out of microphone cable. But the cost goes up significantly for those. And some of them have actually locking jacks on them. And that shows you that it's a very serious extension cable. So if you want to know more—
accidentally unplug yourself by backing up.
Right. Although in some ways that could be thought of as a safety, because I've definitely ruined a headphone jack wearing steel-toed boots and ripping a headphone out of it. That was more than 20 years ago. But I'll put my email in here. I realize Stephanie has it, so that if people want to ask more about headphone extension cables. There was also a question about noise coming from a headphone extension cable. And they can act as antennas and pick up buzz of power supplies if they get too close to. And just for fun, I've had 2 audio issues, one this week and one last week with my Zoom setup that I had to fight through. So there are ways around it. Anyway, I'll put my email in there, and if somebody wants to ask more about headphone extension cables, we can work through it.
And one other thing, if you're for doing this, to consider is where you are recording. If you look at the Takata Ritmika video, I chose a location terribly. I was right in front of a really well lit window, and so everything is washed out in that video. You want to find a place, if you're not in a sanctuary or something that has lots of light, like Kevin is, you want light in front of you, not behind you, and you want to be in a location that has minimal excess noise. So even if you're doing something that doesn't have the ability to cut out extra noise, fans or the air conditioning unit or things like that, try to find where in your home, apartment, whatever, that has the least amount. And you might even need to close the door and close pets out for a little bit, because I've had a cat come through and knock over something in the middle of a recording.
One thing I learned is if you turn off the refrigerator for the recording, put something outside of it to remind you to turn it back on again.
That's definitely good advice. The congregation, John Sasper says, the congregation is used to listening to airplanes. So maybe you want to add that track in to make sure they feel like they have the full experience. Yeah. It's funny how much you can start to hear stuff you've never heard before once you start listening on headphones. And once you start editing audio and video or photographs, you start noticing a lot of stuff. I do this for work all the time. I work for an engineering firm. People will be out in the field and they'll take pictures, and I'm like, did you not notice all of this trash laying in the sidewalk? And they're like, no, I just took a picture of the sidewalk. So I'd always tell them, as much as you can get that stuff out before you take the picture, it's much easier for you to take the 2 seconds and turn the fan off than to try and take the fan out in post.
Yeah.
So I think with
that, our church is located right next to a semi-busy road. So I've discovered what times of the day people drive by a whole lot. So around 5 p.m. is not a good time to record at my church. While turns out 9 p.m. is great. So.
And Andy can also probably speak more to this too, but if you're editing using headphones, actually try to find yourself a nice set of headphones, not just your, like the cheap ones that come with like $10 earbud ones. And Andy can give you probably suggestions as to which ones, but ones that you can actually hear everything that you recorded, because the cheap $10 earbuds will cut out a lot of that extra noise, like the air conditioning and other things like that.
Well, I know. Oh,
Okay, I'll go. Headphone choice is very personal, it turns out. Some people really like certain sounds much more than others, but my two favorite companies are Sennheiser and Grado, and they both sound very different from each other. But I just totally agree with the idea of the really inexpensive earbuds are not the way to make audio decisions. Totally agree.
well, thank you guys. We are hitting a little after 8:15. I don't want to take up all of people's nights. I know we could talk about this forever. And Brian and Kevin and Andy have all put their emails in the chats. So if you have a specific question after you try this week, you have some great resources. We'll be putting the video of this up tomorrow, so in case you missed something, you'll be able to get that. And in case you joined us late, before you leave, if you'll go in the chat and let us know who you are, where you're from, and what group you're with. We love seeing where everybody is from. So thank you all so much, and
Thank you.
we will do this again next week. Thank you all.